This is the Australian Butchers Guild podcast, brought to you by Meat and Livestock Australia, the podcast for passionate butchers.
G'day and welcome to Meat and Livestock Australia's Australian Butchers Guild podcast. I'm Doug Piper and today I'm chatting with the previous owner of Albert and Power Butchers and Providores, as well as Yarra Glen Butchers, Rod Faulkner. And a little bit later on we'll catch up with Stuart Bull, one of MLA's market analysts, to find out what is happening in today's market. A couple of years ago, Rod decided that he wanted a bit of a change of pace and wanted to share his knowledge and help other butchers out there in the trade. So after a delicate surgery procedure to remove his knife kit from his hip, Rod is now the State Manager for the Australian Meat Industry Council in Victoria. Welcome, Rod.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for having me, and what a great opportunity it is to be on this, and so far, what a great set of podcasts we've listened to so far.
I appreciate the compliments, mate. It's good fun. I'm like a lot of other people, I'm learning a little bit about some of the butchers out there and what's happening, and it's a great way to keep engaged with the other butchers too.
Yeah, absolutely, Doug. You know, we've known each other for many years, and what I do know is our industry is such a tight-knit industry, but such a large, broad industry. So it's exciting. It's always been exciting. I've always been highly motivated by what I see in the butchering industry. I love every minute of it, and yeah, I've changed my tact a little bit, Doug, in the last couple of years. But I'm still proud of my industry and very happy to help grow and as best I can help anybody that needs a bit of help or advice. I'm more than happy to provide it, Doug.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of butchers out there that appreciate any assistance they can get today. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and people need to be helped sometimes.
It's funny you say that, Doug, because you know when I first started in the industry some nearly 40 years ago, it was pretty much every man and his dog for himself. And you know the thought of even providing a recipe or something to a butcher up the road or somebody that you potentially knew was unheard of, and now we fast forward to today, and we're all willing to work together. We're all growing, we're all developing, we're all passing on our knowledge to each other, and I think we're starting to see that more and more in the independent retail sector as we move forward, Doug.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right there. Networking and talking with your fellow butchers is the best way to break down the barriers. I remember my first shop many years ago at Coleroy Plateau in New South Wales. I had 7 other butcher shops in the same area, and my biggest opposition was a fella called Noel Kelly, who was a footballer for North Sydney many years ago, passed away just recently. But he used to come around. I used to see him in the reflection of the mirror. One of the bonuses we used to get out of having mirrors and everywhere in the shop was be able to see who was looking in your window from around the corner, and you'd often spot Noel there just sort of checking out the prices. But you know, I think those things that they are long gone now, and butchers are very open to sharing their knowledge and what they're doing to help other butchers become successful.
Exactly, 100% agree. I remember even very on in my early days, you know, seeing somebody, you know, sneak a look through the side mirror, or, you know, one of the things I remember more than anything else early is one of my jobs as a first year apprentice was to walk. I did my apprenticeship in Bridge Road, Richmond, and my job was to walk up Bridge Road, Richmond the day before Butcher's Picnic and make sure all the butcher shops were closed, and everybody closed every year. And then one particular year, everybody said that they were closed and one guy opened, and that just completely changed the tact in how things worked in Richmond. And then it very much was every man and his dog for himself.
And I think the whole networking thing's been that was a big part of what the Red Meat Networking Club, or as it's known, the Australian Butchers Guild, was all based on. Was like, as we mentioned previously, it's breaking down those barriers between the butchers and sharing information to help succeed.
And without a doubt, it was very much a turning point in how independent retail butchers thought and acted, Doug, without a doubt. And hats off when that originally took place. I remember very early on, and I probably didn't take too much notice of it at the time, but I remember one of the first big changes that I saw was was trim lamb, and how trim lamb in its very early days completely changed butchering. We were all, meat and three veg. That's what we did. We had a roast, we had chops, or we had a very little others. But now, in those early days, trim lamb, what an exceptional move it was, and the variety it gave, and what it actually provided butchers was the ability to think a little bit more, or a lot more, outside the box, and realise that yes, we did have a lamb carcass here, and yes, it is made up of a small amount of primals, but there is so many different opportunities that you can develop through that.
It was a great program. Still runs today. If you look around in butcher shops and even in the supermarkets, you'll still see the remnants of the trim lamb programs. Just got different names. But I remember when it first started. It was early in the 80s, I think it was. In New South Wales, we had a launch night at Ride TAFE, and I remember Maxie Walker, was there for the night, and a great ambassador for it, and it went really well. It encouraged shoppers to look outside, and butchers to look outside of the norm, what they usually do. As you said, we cut chops, did steaks, roasts, that's about it. But trimming off all that fat off the lamb was a bit of a crikey, can we afford to do that? But the customers, if you did your pricing correctly, you did all your sums, yes, you could make some good dollars out of it. It was quite a profitable exercise.
I speak so passionately and open about butchering because I've loved it ever since day one. And the one thing that shows more and more is the ability for the independent retailer to reinvent himself. And that was a very much a turning point in butchering, where trim lamb came out and everybody embraced it. We saw good change. We saw new varieties in the window, and that stimulated the customers' thinking and what their thoughts on eating were. And it's just still working in today. We are constantly reinventing ourselves, whether it be through what sort of meal solutions we're providing today, different types of sausages that we're now creating. We were, back in those early days, we were a beef sausage. We were thick beef and thin beef, and that was pretty much it. As an apprentice, I remember our first sausage, and it was like it was Christmas. We did we created a pork and pineapple sausage. I think it was, Doug.
I had the shop that I ended up, my first shop I bought, I was working there for a few years prior. Didn't really get along with the boss that well, not towards the end anyway, after I bought it. But he was quite innovative, and he was very up to date with what was going on, and he had some great ideas about bringing in new sausages and a lot of the value adding side of it. So I got to take my hat off to him in that respect, and I learnt a lot that way. And that's one thing that we need to do is to be open to change.
Absolutely, we need to continually evolve, and even something as simple as our customer service has changed over such let's say those 30, 40 years. We were as simple as, Mrs. Smith walking in the door saying, "I'll have those chopped sausages. Thanks very much. Have a good day." To now we've got chefs behind the counter. We've got social media that's educating customers in how we cook our products, how to heat our products. There's such a broad and vast everything that we bring to the table now. It's not just the basics, and people are very much leaning on the independent local butcher to provide that expert knowledge. And once again, as I said, we have stepped up to the mark, and we're providing this, and service plays such a major part in what we do.
Service and backup, that is the major part, making sure that we're selling the right thing to the customer, what they're looking for, as well as being able to back it up with all of the information that they require to cook it. It's like you hit on it there. We've spoken about it too before with chefs, having them in the shop. It's been they're a valuable asset to anybody.
Oh, without a doubt, and it's part of probably where somewhat the future of butchering is heading, where we've got many independents that now have full-time chefs, and they are cooking a lot of meals within their shop, and they're providing ready to eat meals. And yes, it's really opened customers' eyes at the same time to being able to lean on the independent retailer for quick and fast meals, because we are all aware we're all time poor, and we don't have that ability to cook like we used to, and this is now right at the forefront of where butchering is today, Doug.
Definitely. There's a butcher in Sydney, in Paddington. He used to be married to Donna Hay. His name's Bill Wilson. I've known him now, well, since I started here, which was 14 years ago. He was one of the first butchers I met. And he was, back then, he had a chef working for him, doing all of his cooked products, value-add products. And today, I think he's got about 3 or 4 chefs working for him. And he just pumps out so many meals, ready-to-go meals out of his shop. It's not a huge shop. It's on Oxford Street there. If you ever get to Sydney and you want to have a look at it, it's just down there. It's called Paddington Fresh, and the amount of ready-to-go meals he punches out of that place, mate, it's just unbelievable. And he's making a great living out of it. He's serving his community very well.
And I can 100% vouch for that, Doug. In the last year that we were in business, which was 2019, 2020, just before COVID hit, we also put on a chef. And what started as at the end of the first week, I wanted basically 2 meals. I just wanted a lasagna, both a small and a large, and I wanted a bolognese. And I wanted the whole process. I wanted the ingredients. I wanted the nutritional information. I wanted everything about those 2 dishes. Well, within 12 months, I would say we had probably 15 lines, and we were doing approximately 500 meals a week. And it just shows that people, sport mum walks in the door, shorter time she's got picking up the kids from sport. What are we going to have for tea? Oh, well, I'll just grab that family lasagna, or I'll grab a couple of smaller meals for mum because she's on her own, or the young professional that sort of hasn't really got the hang of cooking as yet and doesn't have a lot of time. They're all there for him, and so many people are now embracing those. And from an independent point of view, the return on investment is so much more greater than what, in some ways, some steaks, chops, and sausages return.
The different types of value-added products that we make, we sort of get stuck in the same olds. Like, we've got a lot of, whether it be cooked or raw product, we've got to look at what sort of cultures, I suppose you'd say, that are around you as well. Like, we're such a multicultural society today where we've got a huge Asian influence, and that's where a lot of our customers, they tend to, not so much, I suppose they are. They're the customers that are in your area. They may not necessarily be shopping with you, and that's simply because you're not giving them what they want. So to help them come back to you or to come to you, you've got to actually service them properly with the type of cuts and have those sort of, whether it be thin sliced or whether it be more whole pieces of meat in your window, so they can actually thin slice it for their meals or for their cuisines. That's another opportunity there where butchers can sort of follow up on.
Without a doubt, 100% agree, Doug. And we're seeing that. I go back to the early days again. We had beef mince in the window, and that's all we had. And now we move forward to today, and many shops have many different types of mince in the window. We have our beef, we have our lamb, we have a chicken. Lamb's straight out of the trim lamb package. We've got chicken and we've got pork mince. Pork mince, many people are using it for san choy bao or so many different, Asian influenced meals. Chicken for more of a lighter meal, and then lamb for things like Greek burgers, koftas. It's great to see, because now people walk into the shop and go, wow, there's so much to choose from. And now they're looking to the butcher for advice, saying, well, this is what I'm thinking of cooking. Can you push me in the right direction? And again, we're once again stepping up to the mark and providing that.
And don't forget, Rod, also you can substitute too. So we don't have to have a pork san choy bao. Like I've got to look after the beef and lamb producers here.
Without a doubt.
But you can substitute your pork for your beef or your lamb or your veal, or even if you want, you can use goat as well. Like it'd be an interesting sort of meal, wouldn't it? A goat san choy bao. I wonder how that'd go.
Well, I suppose we are an industry of constantly evolving, Doug. So I can't see why we couldn't have a goat lasagna.
Exactly.
There's no reason why we can't. I suppose, necessity breeds invention, and that's what butchers have been very, very good at for such a long period of time. There's no reason why we can't, and that shows more so in as you say, the multicultural society that we live in.
Mate, we did some work with a guy called Justin Gilbert up in Dorrigo many years ago with goat. He farmed some goats there. He called Boomer Boars, I think he was called. Really good operator, and he had the best goat pie you've ever eaten in your life.
Nice.
They were lifesavers a couple of times at a couple of trade shows early in the morning. But they weren't a huge pie. They were just a medium between a party pie and a normal sized pie. And oh man, the flavour that he got into those things was incredible.
And it's funny that here we are talking about pies, Doug. You would have said that 20 years ago, if I said to you, we've got butchers now that physically make pies in their shops and sell them by the hundreds. Who would have thought that today we'd be talking about goat pies, brisket pies, beef taco pies? The list goes on where, as I said, we're constantly evolving and changing. And here's another one where we're now moving into pastries and so many different other aspects of value adding that are providing a better outcome for the customer.
Look, the pastries are a sure winner. I think a lot of blokes over the years have steered away from it because it's not their forte. They're all thumbs. It's quite a delicate sort of thing to put together sometimes until you actually get to understand how to use it properly. You've got to make sure all your benches. You've got to have a clean bench. You can't have blood stains or meat all over that bench. It's got to be a designated pastry bench to do it in, so the pastry doesn't get discoloured, and it's got to be folded the right way. And there's so much money you can make out of pastries. And hey, one of my favourites, it's a empanada.
Nice.
I was over in the US a few years back. We were holding these a chef education program where we bring in maybe 20 or 30 chefs from all over the US. We'd take them into somewhere like, say, Chicago, I think it was, and we brought them into one of the Marriotts there. We used their kitchen, and we gave them an education about Australian beef and lamb and how it was grown and what it's all like over here in Australia. And I did a carcass breakdown, just a lamb carcass breakdown, to show them where all the cuts came from, just to give them a bit of education. And after that lunch, they all go into the kitchen. They all get given... They go into groups of 3 or 4, they get given a couple of products, and they go, okay, off you go and create something. So this actually created their juices. And anyway, this day they actually stuck me in one of the groups because they were short of a chef, and I'm not a chef, I'm a butcher. And I ended up doing these beef short rib empanadas. I don't know, I had my mojo on that day, mate. I actually sort of thought about, how can I get this tasting like a Cornish pasty? So I thought about, and I Googled what goes into a pasty, and I sort of massaged it a little bit, put a bit of chili in there, cooked it up properly, got the pastry, we whacked them out into the oven, cooked them. They came up lovely and golden. We threw them out there at the end of the day with everybody else's dishes, and you know what? My dish was the only one that got eaten. There wasn't one left. I was so proud of myself because I'd actually made something, we were with some very talented chefs, but you've got to understand the product that you're working with. Even though mine was short ribs, but I knew what I wanted to make with it. That these guys a lot of them were using lamb, they were using beef. They over there they generally use it's predominantly all grain-fed beef and lamb that they eat over there, whereas Australia, it's grass-fed. It's a little less forgiving if you overcook it, or yeah, mate, very happy with the outcome. And even the exec chef of the Marriott there said he reckoned they were the best empanadas he's ever eaten, but maybe it might have been the 7 or 8 tequilas he'd had before, made him a bit hungrier.
Oh, look, no doubt, Doug. And even what you're talking about there regarding short ribs, that's then leaned on to this whole barbecue revolution that's taking place now, where who would have thought that we'd be talking about beef cheek tacos and the richness and the gelatinous product that it produces makes such a beautiful end product. And like you say, you understand your cut, you understand what you can and can't do and how you cook it, get educated by your independent butcher about the process around it, And what a great return of a product you can produce.
Yeah.
You just can't beat it.
No, you can't. You can't. And you've got to think outside the square when you're making things up. You've got to use the cuts that you've got available. You know, there's quite a few primals that come off a carcass of beef. You know, we just don't get the cheeks. They don't come in on the beef anymore, or they never did. You know, cuts like chuck, you can still do that pulled beef with chuck. It works so well. Think of the muscles that pull apart that slow cook, and add them into your pastries or your pies or whatever you're going to make, and think about utilising those cuts that you've got hanging in your fridge that sometimes that we just end up mincing or leaning up your sausages with.
Even there's a post going around social media at the moment, Doug, about somebody that's slow roasting a whole beef shin on the bone and slow cooked it. The meat literally fell off the bone, and you could just appreciate the richness and softness of the end product. It would be absolutely beautiful, whether you turned it through some pasta or even, as I said, some tacos, or there'd be so many different options that you could create with it. And that's the beauty. That's once again the beauty of butchering, utilizing all these secondary cuts. It's not just all about, as you say, you know, the main sweet cuts. There's so many different options, and that's where butchers really come to the fore with the guys that really take advantage of those secondary cuts and the return that they can create from those chucks and blades and those sort of things. I remember, you know, briskets back in the early days were either rolled for corn brisket or they went into mince. You know, who'd be putting a brisket into mince these days?
I don't know any butchers that don't do that anymore. Crikey, you know, you'd be hung, drawn, and quartered if you posted that on social media, especially by some of the you know, those barbecue groups. Say sacrilege, sacrilege. Don't do that with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as I said, that's that whole barbecue thing where we're getting to. You've got people asking for branded product, and you've got people asking for different marble scores of product, and once again, we're educating the consumer in these sort of areas. And similar sort of thing I come back to again, Doug. We're reinventing ourselves. We're stepping into the modern society once again.
Look, part of my job that I like to muck around with is the product development days that we do every now and again. Don't do enough of them. And one of the I think it was one of the value-added nights we had in Sydney. I pulled a chuck apart. So I got myself a little Wagyu chuck roll. It was about a marble score 6, I think it was. And I pulled the chuck eye log out, and we cut the Denver steaks and the Delmonico. Well, the Delmonico gets cut out of the chuck eye log, and the Denver gets cut out of the rib flat meat. And I gave them to the chef and told him to cook it up and bring it out at half time, you know, when we had a bit of a break. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the guys, all the butchers that were there, they all tried it, and they thought it was pretty good. And afterwards, you know, we sort of put it out to them and said, "So what did you just eat?" And we had a couple of guys go, "I think it was Scotch fillet." One guy said rump. I think we had a strippy, and a couple of them did say, "I think it was chuck." And yeah, it was chuck, and it ate so darn good because it was Wagyu. But the opportunity there to put something different in your window. That you don't often see, that you can have a story around, like, where does this come from? You know, why haven't we seen this before? You've got to handle that correctly. Well, you've got to say that it is actually chuck, but it is a muscle that's around the chuck, and it's cut a specific way. We've got to trim it right up and cut it a specific way to get it to this stage. And using Wagyu, it just makes it so much better. You know, we like I say to people when I talk about this, I wouldn't use a grass-fed one. You might get away with an MSA one, but I'd probably steer away from anything grass-fed. But anything sort of 150 over, 150-day grain-fed over, or Wagyu, mate, she eats a treat.
Oh, yeah, it's not rich and buttery and soft and moist, and you just can't beat it. And, you know, it's the same with, like you say, you know, we talk about things like hanger steak. You know, hanger steak is something that really, once again, used to go into mince, and how rich and full of flavour it is, and if it's cooked well, the tenderness that it nearly beats any piece of steak. Not any piece of steak, but it beats a lot of pieces of steak hands down for just the depth of flavour and just the moisture content in it. And then if you up the ante and as you say, talk about a little bit of wagyu hanger steak. Well, that's then raising the bar even further, and you can nearly eat that sort of product with a straw, Doug.
Pretty close to it, mate. I've been lucky enough to have a couple of wagyu ones in my freezer from time to time, and I don't disagree with you anywhere there, mate. It is just such a great piece of meat. It was once referred to, or I think it probably still is, as the butcher's cut. One of those butcher's cuts, there's a couple of them that people carry on about, saying, oh, we never see it, the butcher, he must eat it for breakfast. Well, I tell you what, if it came on the carcass, the butcher would be eating it for breakfast. It certainly wouldn't be making it into the shop, that's for sure.
Absolutely. How good is it? That's one of the perks of being the butcher, though, Doug, isn't it?
Yep, definitely is. And for those that don't understand where the hanger steak comes from, or where the hanging tender comes from, it's also called the thick skirt. But it's actually, if you think about the carcass of beef and where the tenderloin comes down to the point end, when you buy your bodies of beef in, specifically around the hindquarter part where the tenderloin finishes, you often see a little bit of meat hanging there. Yeah, and that's where it's connected to, and then it runs up around the diaphragm. So it's actually it does a lot of work. It's quite a coarse piece of meat, and it's got a thick connective tissue running through the centre of it, separating the two pieces of meat. But it's got the flavour.
Yeah, you ask your butcher to trim it all up for you, so you all you've got is the end product.
I think the beauty about being an independent retail butcher is that you can be reactive, and you can get that in tomorrow. Whereas on the other side of the coin, the retailers, it takes them 6 to 12 months to get one product, one new line onto the shelves. So that's where I think butchers have that big opportunity to be reactive and to service their customers well.
And to that point, Doug, a big shout out to all the independent local butchers out there. What a strange and tough times we sit in through COVID and what we've been through, and what you're talking about really showed what independent butchers are made of. When things got tough, we had panic buying set in, and we had so many guys, all of them, shout out to all of them for stepping up to the plate and providing for the community, because that's what they're there for, and that's what they do. And sometimes, yeah, they don't get the notice and the notoriety that they should. But at that time, Doug, and it's still happening today to an extent, we're seeing more and more people come in and lean on our independence because they have that ability to turn things around quickly. And yes, at times there in those early days, in those panic buy, there were guys working at 11 o'clock at night just trying to make sausages for the following day. But it just showed the value of them and what they bring to the table.
They all need a big pat on the back, and butchers, a lot of butchers are just so humble. They don't look for recognition. They just, like you said, they just do what they do. They get on, they do their job. They don't want a lot of accolades. They just want a thanks. That's all it is. And that carton of beer at Christmas time too. Don't forget about that.
Oh, yeah, don't forget that carton of beer, Doug. That's probably one of the most important parts of it. But during the year, yeah, just to see somebody walk through the door and say hello to them and hold some small talk with them. A lot of the independents just like that bit of banter and to see people coming in over years and years and seeing families grow up and kids get older, and that's part of what they love, and that's what I used to love, seeing that constant having a bit of a banter with Mrs. Smith every Thursday or whatever day she used to come in, and see how the family's going, what they've got coming up, birthdays, Christmases, all those sort of things. And you develop as your own little butcher shop. You develop into one great big happy family.
Yep, that's what it's all about, mate. Looking after the community, watching the families grow, feeding them up.
Oh, you can talk, sponsoring the local football club, the cricket club, the netball club, all of those sort of things, being active in the community in one way, shape or form. That's a lot of things that go unnoticed in the independents that they really concentrate on, because they are stalwarts of our community. They're leaders of our community, don't.
And that's a lot where AMIC are involved into in the retail side of it as well. So where you're at the moment in Victoria, what's AMIC doing down there?
as you can appreciate, Doug, it's tough times down here in Victoria. And look, I think we're day 230, I think, in lockdown in Victoria. And from an AMIC's point of view, it's hard because we're in lockdown, we're out of lockdown, we're in lockdown, we're out of lockdown, and it's hard to get out and see the guys on a regular basis. That's our biggest shortcoming at the moment. That's the difficult part, because it's just not feasible. And the one thing we don't want to do is potentially have the virus and take it from shop to shop.
No.
That's the last thing anybody would want to do. So we're just going through a series of phone calls at the moment, talking to every member in Victoria and Tasmania, seeing how they are. Is there anything we can help them with? They need any food safety advice. We've got how Sausage King's going at the moment. We've got a majority of competitions done. We've got a couple that we've still got to go. We've got our Apprentice of the Year competition we've still got to go, which I think, looking at this stage, Doug, we'll probably get done in probably the first or second week of November. That's when we sort of get back to relative normality in Victoria. So I'm fingers crossed that we can do that, because a lot of the guys really love that competition, and I love providing it, and Luke loves providing it. We don't want to disappoint anybody and not being able to provide that. So we're eyes on the prize at the moment to try and get those competitions done, and then fingers crossed we don't get too late in the year where we can finish off our state finals.
I'm sure the butchers will understand, and there's only so much you guys can do, and there's only so much they can do or they can control. So looking forward to getting the end results later on the year and celebrating the winners of the competitions and the apprentice competitions that are coming up.
Absolutely. It's all, from our point of view, it's all about communication at the moment, and just trying to keep in contact with all of them, really, as much as we possibly can. And if they need anything, we're here to help. So in any way, shape or form. So for anybody out there, don't hesitate to get in touch with myself or Luke. We're more than happy to help and provide. If you need anything, don't hesitate to jump on the phone and give us a call.
Yeah, fantastic work, mate. Appreciate your help out there. And, mate, it's been great chewing the fat with you and catching up. Thanks a lot for your time this afternoon. And we're going to get you back on a little bit later on down the track and catch up about a few other things as well.
I appreciate your time, Doug. Thanks for the opportunity. It's great to see the exposure that this great podcast brings to everybody, and how it can educate people and bring people together in one way, shape or form, Doug. So thanks for that.
No worries, mate.
Good on you, Doug.
My next guest is MLA's market analyst, Stuart Bull. Stuart comes from Boree Creek down in the Riverina area in New South Wales, where they grow some Hereford cattle, some lovely sheep, and do a fair bit of cropping. Stewie, how are you, mate?
Good, thank you, Doug. How about yourself?
Going well. Lovely to see a bit of the warmer weather coming through finally.
Yes, 100%. Well needed, I think. Keen to get outside very soon and make the most of it, that's for sure.
You want to give us a little bit of an update about what's happening around the traps with beef and lamb around the country for the butchers?
Certainly, and thanks for having me as well. So again, I'm sure it's no real secret, but prices continue to be very strong across both sheep and cattle. Starting with cattle, I know our friend Ripley from last week talked around the Eastern Young cattle price, and again what that was doing. We actually hit an all-time high this week on Tuesday at 1,033 cents per kilogram carcass weight. So again, another milestone which just highlights the confidence of the sector currently. And again, that's come about for a few key reasons. But in particular, what we're seeing are producers really look to buy light. So again, what we're seeing is because the money's so good for lighter cattle at the moment, we're actually seeing more heifers come out of the woodwork, particularly out of New South Wales and Queensland, which actually right now you would think that with the grass in front of you, being a producer, that you would want to hold on to those female cattle. But what we're actually seeing is the offloading of some of those younger type cattle for other producers or feedlotters to really snap up. That's a lot of what we're seeing currently. That's really driving the high prices. Demand is super high. Supply's been pretty consistent throughout the year, and we've actually seen more cattle come onto the market in the last couple of months, and yet we still continue to see prices rise all across the supply chain. So very strong signals. And in regards to lamb and sheep, very similar, but of course we are hitting that kind of seasonal period where we're seeing more young lambs come onto the market, which is exciting, particularly out of New South Wales and Northern Victoria. So the Riverina down where I'm from, we're seeing solid throughput start to ramp up there, and we're seeing some really strong prices being fetched from those sale yards. And again, in the next kind of few weeks, we expect to see more lambs coming on board from southwest Victoria and parts of South Australia. So again, that's where we see the bulk of those lambs come through. Typically in a couple of months, we'll kind of hit that spring lamb peak. But again, some really promising signs to see strong prices. They have softened somewhat with the supply coming on board, but still historically very strong, not far off some record levels from last year.
Yeah, that's good in a way, I suppose. Like discounting the price side of it, it's good to see that there's plenty of lamb around currently, and it's a great season for the farmers. Butchers have got the opportunity there to put more lamb on the shelves, I suppose, and keep the customers happy and make sure they drive those lamb sales. Beef being where it is at the moment, it's not going to change. So we see butchers. With butchers, it's about 50%, 50 to 60% of their sales each week. So it's always going to be a strong protein for them, and they're quite used to the difference in prices these days. So they just get on and do the job. So anything else happening out there, mate?
I think the narrative, particularly again, I do more with the cattle market traditionally. So what we are seeing is. Again, I touched on really a lot of producers looking to really cash in currently. So again, what that's meaning is that we're seeing, again, there's cattle on feed somewhere. We're just seeing a lot of kind of transactions at the lighter end of the supply chain. But I want to talk probably about the vealer market quickly. It's something that's of note again, and probably to butchers more so. Again, so vealers being lighter type cattle, typically around that kind of 150 to 200 kilo mark. Again, vealer supplies have been very low this year, and typically at this time of year, we do see supply continue to contract. Again, we are seeing some pretty good money thrown at vealers, but I think, times are very tough because what we're seeing is being a restocker-driven market. A lot of those kind of younger type cattle that would typically go to your butchers or to your processors for your domestic trade are actually being snapped up by restockers, or the producers are choosing to grow them out because of the money that they can get to more of a weaner and feeder weight. Again, we continue to see short supply of those type of cattle, but what we're also seeing for vealers and also yearlings is that there's really light types, so like the 0 to 200 kilogram that I just spoke about. We're seeing more of those cattle come on board. So it's crazy to think that demand keeps rising and we continue to see phenomenal amounts of money paid. But let's be honest, not much work from the producer because they're giving birth to a calf and then they're selling it within a year. So again, that reward for effort is so in favour of the producer, which is just kind of a key trend that has continued for much of the last kind of 12 to 18 months. But again, we're seeing more of the extremes of that dynamic now.
Yeah, I was talking to a mate of mine up at Casino about a couple of weeks ago, and they've been struggling to get that. They're a big veal area up there, obviously. That's one of their brands, is a veal brand. And they're really struggling to get animals through there. So it explains where they're all going for the restockers, that's for sure.
100%.
Now, I've got to ask you, what's your favourite cut of beef or lamb? See if you can top Rip's one.
I feel like we could be similar. No, he said crumbed lamb cutlets, did he not?
Yeah, that's right.
They're also probably my favourite lamb dish, but I'll go with the beef one. I've always loved my Scotch fillet, to be honest.
Yeah.
Or the ribeye, beautiful cut of meat. I remember growing up, and everyone had the local butchery in town, and I used to kind of as a kid want to work at a butchery just because of the smell and the experience of when you walked in there. It was such a distinct smell. And anyway, the first thing I'm doing when we get out of lockdown here up in Sydney is I've booked a table for two at Six Head on the Rocks, which specialise in beef. So very keen to do that and to indulge in some beautiful Wagyu fillet.
Yeah, I don't think you'll be disappointed there, mate. It's a great restaurant to head out to. We did a little bit of work with the guys from Six Head with Sammy Burke a few months back there, and they're some awesome chefs, mate. They're fantastic fellas. It's
quality produce. I think we do a degustation menu, so you get a bit of everything for two people plus a bottle of wine. It's fantastic.
Sounds good, mate. Well, I hope you enjoy it when you get out of lockdown, buddy.
Thank you. I sure will.
All right then, Stu. Thanks a lot for your time today, mate. And we'll catch up with you next time.
No worries. Thanks for having me again, Doug. Cheers.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for today, and thanks for tuning in. If you'd like more information about today's episode or any others, you can contact me on butchers@mla.com.au. And don't forget to subscribe to the Australian Butchers Guild podcast so you don't miss an episode. I'm Doug Piper. See you in a fortnight.
You've been listening to the Australian Butchers Guild podcast, produced by The Sound Business.